Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. Welcome to another technique tidbit video where I focus on one specific technique and then turn in a page. And this time you get a bonus technique because, well, I put two on the one page. So this is my mini composition book that I am using to showcase these techniques. There are videos for all of these pages. I will link them below. I'm using my art journal prompt and process cards. This is a digital download that you can purchase from NINNYSNAPKINS, but this has technique cards. It's not about the theme or the what you're creating. It's about the techniques and the how, the steps. So today I'm going to do two, paint an ombre background and stamp a sentiment on the excess plies of napkins, which is something that you haven't done, but you're going to take in. So let's first create the background. So here's the color wheel. And you don't really need a color wheel, but what you're going to do is pick two colors that are apart from each other, a light and a dark. So here I'm using yellow and red. And then you gradually blend them in the middle so that you get all those shades and tones in the middle. So you get that variation going up and down or side to side. So let's talk about a couple others here. Here I'm using red and I believe a violet. Now you can see from the distance between the light and the dark, there's not much difference in between. So the further they're apart on the color wheel, the more variation and different tones you're going to get. And I might be using that term incorrectly. Here I'm using a blue and a light green. And you can see the variation. We're going to recreate this one on my mini art journal page. Now you can go side to side or up and down. I am going to go side to side, and I don't want variation. This is a very small substrate. So at first I grabbed cobalt blue here, and I'm going to use that light green. I could go to yellow if I wanted more variation. But again, because this is a small substrate, I'm keeping it fairly simple because there's not a whole lot of room to get all the variations. But if you were doing this on an full-size art journal page, you may have a wider span and have more of the shades going up and down. I swapped out to ultramarine blue, a little bit darker blue. Now, I'm just grabbing excess papers from a used up Sudoku. And yes, I haven't done these. These are the hard puzzles, and I just don't do hard Sudoku. But I'm putting it to use. So on my glass palette, I'm just going to put some green and some of the blue that I've chosen. And off to the side, I'm grabbing a brush. Now, I learned by trial and error that the makeup sponge, which I like for putting on paint, doesn't really work the best for this technique. So grab a brush and a larger one, and you're going to want to put a little bit of water on it. I'm using medium body paint that is Liquitex Basics primarily, and it's a little bit thick. So I am watering it down somewhat. That helps it blend. Now, this has been gessoed, and that's going to help the paint move. So on the bottom, I'm going to put the light color, and at the top, I'm going to put the dark color. You could reverse this. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to put solid color kind of going up, and I want to keep this wet because that's going to allow me to keep it blending. It's open, and so I can keep mixing those colors because I want to blend the two colors in the middle and get those variations, that ombre effect. So I'm putting the blue pretty much straight up with a little bit of water, and then I'm going to bring the blue down, bring the green up, and I'm going to keep playing with that blend in the middle till I get the variations that I want. Adding a little bit of water, right? And so we kind of almost get a bit of a teal color in there, a very different tone. And play with the colors. Go around the color wheel and pick a dark and a light and see what you get. You never know I did a kind of sample on just on index cards that I showed you at the beginning. So here I'm adding a little bit more of that solid green on the bottom, and I can add more solid blue at the top. I'm just building up the layers or the intensity of color as I go. Now, because this is a gessoed surface, because I've glued pages together in the composition book, there are wrinkles on there. That's just added texture, and I love that. That's just going to add to my page. But if that's you see those marks and lines in there, that's why that's there. So now I'm just removing that, and there we have the ombre effect using a blue and a light green. And here is a close-up, and you can see, the wrinkles and the texture that was there. So now we're just moving to finishing this page. And art journaling, mixed media, it's all about the layers. So I just want to add some stamping on here. So I've got this circle stamp, and I am applying black acrylic paint on it with a makeup sponge. And I'm stamping. And as you can see, I am not trying to get perfect stamping. I just want texture and pattern on my background. I want it to not just be plain ordinary, although with the ombre background, it really bumps it up. It's a little special. And because this is so small, we're going to lose a lot of that background. But the ombre background was just the first layer, right? So I'm washing off my stamp. Then I'm thinking about focal image. And I just got a shipment of napkins from Ninny's Napkins. And I have these adorable otters. And they have that blue-green in them. So I think that's why I was thinking about it. I want to lighten up my background a little bit. So I'm just stamping some script stamp there with white. Now, I did not think through this entire page from beginning to end before I started the video. So there is some back and forth. There are some things that I would do different now that I know where I went with it. Have that. I'm thinking of using these otters on a card, and by experimenting on this page, I now know what to do or not to do, or how I would do it differently. So you always take what you learn and move it forward in that learning process. Don't be afraid to make a mistake or have to rework something because, well, you didn't know you needed that. So back to the napkin, I've cut off the main part of the focal image, and then I am peeling off the 2 excess layers. You always want to do this when you are doing a napkin. And as I said, the second technique, we are going to stamp our sentiments on those napkin plies. And I will explain why you want to do that. So I peeled off the 2 layers, and then I want to make this opaque. If I glued this down on my background with that darkness, that green, that blue is going to come through and distort the color of the otter. And I don't want to do that. So to avoid that, I'm going to use my fluid matte medium, glue this down on a piece of recycled copy paper, and that's going to preserve the colors and prevent that bleed through from my very dark background. And I'm just putting a coat of the fluid matte medium on top to seal it and turn it into a non-porous surface. This is going to take some time to dry, so you can use a heat tool with it, or you can just let it dry if you have the patience. And then you are simply going to cut it out. Now, there's a lot of excess stuff and stuff happening in the background. I am going to remove most of that. I just want the otters on there. And I'm going to recreate some of that, some of the foliage and stuff that's there because I've created the background myself. Now you'll notice there's some greenery on the back side of that one otter. It's not perfect, but I'm going to show you how I'm going to hide that. So even though I'm focusing on 2 techniques, you're getting some other bonus tidbits of information. I can place this however I want. I like sometimes putting part of the focal image off it and a little bit off center. And then I'm gluing this down, and I've chosen to use my gel medium, not my fluid medium. It's just because it's thicker. And then once that's dry, I'm just cutting off the excess. I'm liking how this is looking, and now I need to perfect it. And I have some foliage here that I am just going to stamp with some green with a little bit of black in it. So I get a couple different shades of green. And then I'm just going over top of that. That's kind of um, camouflaging the foliage that was on the otter and making the page all work together. So I'm adding a little bit of foliage here and there, all with the same stencil. So look at your stencils. You don't even need a specific foliage one. You can have a flower one that has some petals that you can use, leaves that you can use, right? So I'm liking the look of that. Now I want to intensify the color of the otters. They are the focal image. So I grab my Inktense blocks, I look at my swatches, and I'm matching it as close as possible. I'm actually going to darken the color just a bit. I'm taking the Inktense block and getting, activating it with water and painting over the otters. It's staying on the surface. That is a non-porous surface because I put a layer of the matte medium on it. And it's just darkening and it makes it, I think, fit better on the page. If you aren't comfortable doing this over painting, you can skip this step and it'll look just fine. Here I'm just darkening the log that they're standing on and grounding them. And then I'm putting some of the whites in. If you don't have Inktense blocks, you can use watercolors, but that will reactivate if you put any other wet medium on top. You can also water down your acrylic paint and do a wash over it. Here I'm just shading. I'm doing some of the finishing stuff, just making that focal image pop. So off camera, I went onto Pinterest and I put in otter quotes. And I was looking for some cute otter quote that I could put on here, some sentiment that I can do. So I kind of did a little bit of research before because I know, even once I got this napkin, I knew I wanted to use it. So I kind of had the sentiment part of it in the works. Here I'm just adding some of the details in, adding the whiskers that I cut off when I cut out the napkin focal. So now we're going to stamp on the excess ply. So I like to use kind of a full napkin. Around the edge, sometimes it's got crinkles or a pattern that don't necessarily go away. So here I'm just pulling off the excess ply. Now the ply that is right next to the picture sometimes has ink on it. So I like to use the outside ply for this. Now, when you're stamping sentiments, you can use sentiments that you have from stamp sets like these. This is Live, Love, Laugh. I could use that. I put black acrylic paint and I stamped it. I'm putting it on the napkin. If I make a mistake, no problem. If you are putting a sentiment on a textured thing, stamping right onto it might not work because it's hard to get a perfect stamp. On here, you're going to get that perfect stamp. And if it doesn't work, you can just stamp it again. I usually do multiples and get a better stamp. I always seem to be stamping challenged a bit, and I always need a couple more on there. Now, because it's on the white ply of the napkin, what is white will go mostly transparent or translucent, so you're not going to see that. Now, if I take that black and put it on the dark background that I have the blue, and I'm just putting it on here because this is dark, the sentiment kind of disappears. And here I didn't use enough fluid medium and I didn't get rid of enough of the white napkin around it. Especially when it's a dark napkin, you want to get as much as possible. If it was a very light background, it wouldn't show as much. So this is not going to work for my page. But when you're stamping on the napkin, you can also stamp with white. And I'm going to use my wooden letter blocks for that. That means I can stamp any quote, I can personalize it. And I am going to stamp utterly amazing. There's not a lot of room, so I'm using small blocks. And here I'm using white acrylic paint, stamping it on, and then stamping on the napkin. Now I put a piece of sheet of paper underneath. Don't do that. Leave your silicone or glass table mat because the paint goes through and it attached itself to the paper and I was unable to release it without ripping it. So I ended up stamping again. So I'm just stamping. It's really hard to see white on white, unfortunately, but I'm going to show you a close-up of this. And I'm not even trying to put it on a straight line. I'm kind of making it flow a little bit. Now, this white is going to be perfect for putting on the dark blue at the top of my art journal page. There's a close-up of it, and then I'm going to finish this off camera. You don't need to watch me stamp every single one. Then I am simply going to cut out closely the word utterly, just so it's easier to manipulate instead of having this big sheet, and amazing. So I kind of cut them out in rectangles. Then I'm going to use my water brush and go around it as closely as I can, eliminating as much of that napkin as I can without disturbing the text. So this is sometimes why I stamp more than one, because sometimes things happen. Now I have that white script stamp on there. That's just going to interfere now that I'm doing white. This is where I didn't plan this, but so I'm giving this a wash of the blue paint just to knock back that white so it doesn't interfere with the white sentiment that I'm putting on here. Mixed media, it's all about problem solving. If something doesn't work, there's a workaround, always. And I like the challenge of that. So once I've just kind of knocked back that script a little bit, now I'm going to grab my water brush and go closely to it. You do not need a lot of water on here at all. A little goes a long way. Too much water is going to make it really difficult. And then you're just going to pull it apart and get that deckled edge that's going to help hide where the sentiment is, where the napkin begins. So go little by little. Don't rush this step or you'll end up having to do it over. Trust me, I know. Can you cut each letter separately? Absolutely. And then glue them next to each other or break it up into two parts. If that makes it easier, that's what you should do. So I apologize that some of this is off camera. I've zoomed in so you get a good close look, and then I forgot. So, but you're going to see the important parts. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the second word. And there I can place them now wherever and kind of audition it, get the perfect placement. And here I'm using lots of fluid matte medium. You want lots because that the more you put, the more translucent it goes. And you can see how, even with that dark background, because I'm using lots of this, that white of the napkin disappears and you don't really notice it. So here I'm doing a better job. The one that I glued on the red, I made my mistakes. So even here, it's really dark in front of that foliage, and you can still see that green coming through. The background is coming through, but your letters are white. So if you have a dark background and you want to stamp a personalized thing, this might be the way to go. Stamp it in white. So utterly amazing. If this was a card, you could say, you are utterly amazing. I wasn't quite happy with the background. We needed a little something, so I grabbed my shelf liner and I put white acrylic paint on it and I'm stamping some of that on there. I don't know, it brightens the page. I was just a whole lot happier once I added this on there. Personal choice was perfectly fine the way it was, but I just kind of made it all work together. At least that's what I think. So I'm really happy with the page. I'm just going to do some shading around the outside, the border around the edge, and that just frames it and makes it all work together. One of the finishing things that I do pretty much on every single page or project. As I'm looking at it, I'm going, you know what? This needs a splatter of gold. That little bit of yellow also works really well with the blue and the green in there. You know, who doesn't want a little bling? If you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, tell your friends, hit that subscribe button. The link to the process cards, the prompt and process cards will be in the description box below. So there we have it. 2 techniques all in one, printing on an ombre or creating an ombre background as the first layer. Play with the colors, experiment, have fun. And stamping a sentiment on excess plies of napkin. And we stamped with black, and I've showed you also the benefit of doing it in white. There's my art journal and prompt and process cards. And here are some close-ups of the finished page. I think it's utterly amazing. What do you think? Until next time, go get creative.